Kiddushin Daf, we begin with a brisa discussing the pasuk begapa yavei begapa yetze, two explanations as to what that means. And then we get into a lengthy sugya discussing the halacha of an eved redeeming himself, and the Gemara will have a number of shilas pertaining to how that works. So let's begin the work with the brisa. The Torah says about an eved ivri begapa yavei im begapa yavei begapa yetze. So what's begapa? The Gemara brings two explanations, right? It says begapa, if he comes in, begapa, he goes out, begapa. What does that mean? Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says it means if he comes in alone, he leaves alone. The Gemara says that means that if he comes in without a wife and children, then the master cannot force him to take a wife and children, to bear children for him. The Tanna Kama's opinion here is that when it says begapa, it means begufa, with his body. And what it means to teach me that if he comes in with his body, he leaves with his body, he does not leave with less than his body. Meaning to say that he's different than an Eved Kanani. An Eved Kanani who loses a limb, that frees him. An Eved Ivri who loses a limb does not get freed because of that. So Gemara asks that Abaye said, we already have a makar for that halacha. That halacha is from it says, Lo Seitzik Etzeis Havadim. It does not go out like an Eved Kanani goes out by the loss of a limb. Someone says, no, if you would have only had that pasuk alone, you would have thought he doesn't go out the same way an Eved Kanani goes out by the loss of limb. He does go out, though. As a matter of fact, it goes out even better. And that's that he gets paid for his limb and he goes out. Supposed to Eved Kanani who just goes free and he does not get paid for it. Therefore, this mission has to teach me he doesn't go free at all. The Gemara now begins a lengthy discussion about the redemption of a Eved Ivri. So an Eved Ivri can redeem himself by paying off the years remaining in his service. We calculate how much it costs per year, and based on that, he can pay off the years, and then he goes free those amount of years early. So Mara's question here is centered on what happens if his value changes. Now, that could happen if the market for him change, or if his skills value changes, or if he becomes injured, or becomes healthier, or he learns a new skill. So if his value changes, do you calculate based on his sale price, or do you calculate based on the time at the end of his years when he wants to go free, how much it is then? So let's say his value went up from 100 zuz to 200 zuz. Do you take 100 zuz divided by 6 and that's the value per year? Or do you take 200 zuz divided by 6 and that's the value per year? On the other hand, what if it went down from 200 to 100? What happens then? So the Brisa says, you go l'kula either way. You use the lesser amount either way. Either way, you use just the 100. What's the source? So the Brisa quotes contradictory psukim as to whether you evaluate from the amount of sale or the value at the time of redemption. On the one hand, it says mikesef mikanasai, from the money of his purchase. On the other hand, it says kifi shanav, at the value of his years. That implies at the end of his years. So how do you resolve these two? So one is talking about you go by his purchase price when that's lower, and you go by the value of his years when that's lower. The Brisa continues, and I notes these psukim are written by an Eved Ivri who sold to an Eved Kechavim. How do you know that the same thing is true to an Eved Ivri that sold to Yisrael? Now, an Eved Ivri that sold to an Eved Kechavim has a special leniency for the benefit of the Eved Ivri against the Eved Kechavim, and that's that he could be redeemed by a relative, and that relative can pay the amount, and the Eved Kechavim has to allow him to be redeemed. You don't have that halacha by redeeming from Yisrael. So you see, therefore, there's a weakness in the owner's position there. How do you know that same weakness would apply to an Eved Ivri who belongs to Yisrael, to give the lower price to the benefit of the Eved Ivri? So Gemara says, because you have a Gzeir Shav between the two, it says the word Sachir, both in the pasuk of an Eved Ivri sold to Yisrael and an Eved Ivri sold to an Akum, and therefore you know that you link the two when you learn this halacha. So now the Gemara wants to know, how do you know that you should resolve both psukim for the leniency? Maybe you should say that the two are both l'chumra, but you should use the higher price both ways. So the Gemara quotes Abaye was once speaking from a place of confidence. And we find this a few times in Shas. He said that I am like Ben Azai in the streets of Tiberia, meaning to say that he felt like he could answer any question at that time. And someone asked him this question. How do you explain this? So Abaye said, very simple, because you see that the Torah was lenient for the Eved Ivri because it says that you have to treat him well. You have to give him the benefit of everything. It says, Ki toiv lo imach. He has to be with you with food, with you with drink. And from there, we learn that you cannot eat light bread yourself and give him coarse bread. You can't drink wine and give him grape juice. You can't sleep on a mattress and make him sleep on straw. As we say, anybody who buys an Eved Ivri is as if he bought a master for himself. You have to give him the best of all the things that you have. So therefore, you see that we give him the benefit, and therefore he gets the lower price both ways, and not the higher price both ways, not the higher amount that he needs to pay each way. So Gemara says maybe that leniency to him is only as far as eat and drink, in order that he should not be in pain when he's in your home. But as far as redeeming himself, maybe he has to redeem himself for the higher price. How do you know? It's a whole different thing. As a matter of fact, the Gemara says we're going to bring a brisa of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, which seems to show that you should treat him strictly. Why should I treat him strictly? So Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina is a lengthy brisa, which ends up saying that an Eved Ivri only finds himself in this position because he violated the halachas of Shemitah. So let's see the brisa. The brisa quotes Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, who says, "Look how bad even the dust of violating Shemitah is." Somebody who sells Shemitah fruits doesn't actually work on Shemitah. He sells Shemitah fruits. In the end, he's going to end up having to sell all his positions, like it says. And here we're going to go through psukim in order, discussing things that a person has to sell as part of the redemption. These are the halachos of the redemptions of one's possessions, and it lists in order that he sells things. So it says, Bishnas hayovel tashuvu ish al chuzasai. At Yovel, a person returns to his property, and right after that it says ki simkaru mimkar la misacha. That's talking about metaltlin, things which a person has. So you see that it talks about Yovel, talks about Shemitah, and then it says that you end up having to sell your things. So if you violate Shemitah, you're going to have to sell your things. So the Gemara says, and if the Brisa continues and says, and if he doesn't sense that he did something wrong and that's why he's in this position, he's going to end up having to sell his fields. Now, you see that from the next pasuk that says, he's going to get even poorer and he's going to sell his inherited lands. Now, if he still doesn't notice, then he's going to have to sell his house, like it says, Now the Gemara interrupts here. The Gemara says, when you talked about the fact that he didn't notice the Aveira, so in the first case, you used the phrase, loy hirgish, he didn't feel it. In the second case, you used the phrase, loy bas yadai, it didn't come to his hand. Why do you use a different phrase here for these two? The Gemara explains, loy hirgish means that he didn't notice on his own. Loy bas yadai means he's not going to notice. The Tana is saying he's going to keep going. This is the path that he's going to follow. Why do we say that? Because like Rav Huna said, once a person has repeated an Aveira a second time, it becomes mutter. The Gemara says, mutter? No, not really mutter, but it's like heter to him. He's not going to notice that it's a problem any longer. So therefore, the first time, it's he had a possibility of noticing. If he chose not to, we'll get to the second time. Once that happens, from here on in, the Tana is telling you what's going to happen. Anyway, so what's going to happen next? So the Tana says after he sells his house, he's going to end up having to sell his daughter into servitude, like it says, Ki yimkar ish es bitay la'ama. Even though it doesn't say bitay specifically in this context, bitay is written elsewhere, but we know that we have that one would sell his daughter before he sells with ribis, because his daughter he doesn't lose more from and adds to his value. Selling with ribis costs him. And in our context here, we talk about the next thing is that he's going to have to sell with ribis. Like it says, Kiyam chachicha, mater di'imach, and right afterwards it says, Al tikach me'itoi neshech v'sarvis. You should not take ribis. So our next discussion is ribis. So therefore, the next thing in the pasuk is ribis. Selling the daughter comes before that, because one sells his daughter before he borrows with ribis. And what follows afterwards is that he's going to have to actually sell himself, because it says afterwards, he's going to have to sell himself. Afterwards, it says not only to sell to you, but it says lager. As the pasuk says, v'chisasa gad ger v'toishav imach. Nimkar leger toishav imach, or le'eker mishpachas ger. So it refers to a ger toishav and an eker. So selling to you is to a Yisrael. A ger toishav is not a Yisrael. It's not a ger tzedek. A ger toishav is one who is still an akum, but he's not able to pay the zara. Mishpachas ger is the next thing it says. That is an actual avodah zara, and le'eker means to the avodah zara itself, to the actual temple or to the priests. Not that he's going to actually be avodah zara, but he'll be used for the benefit of the avodah zara. So this is the brisa, but what we see from here is that he only put himself in this position because of an aveira that he did, so perhaps we should be strict on him. That's Mar's question. So by answers on that, no, we see that the Torah invites him back. We have a brisa that says, Rabbi Shmuel said, if somebody went and became a priest for avodah zara, what are you going to do, throw stones after him so they should fall even further down? No, it says after he was sold, he can still be redeemed. And one of his brothers should redeem him. So we invite him to be redeemed. We want him to come back. So therefore, no, we don't chase him away, and that's why this is not a taina that we should be stricter on him. So Gemara says, why not? Perhaps all it means is that we invite him back, and he can be redeemed, because we don't want him to be lost amongst the goyim. However, we're still going to be machmir as far as the amount. That he's allowed back, yes, but that we should be lenient for him, that we're not going to. And again, because, like Rabbi Yisrael said, it didn't have error to get here. So Gemara says, because you have a different source. The source is follows. It's brought by Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. It says that there are two psukim discussing how you calculate those years of redemption. It's two phrases actually in the same pasuk. It says Imoid Rabbeis Bashanim, if there's a lot in the years, and Ima'at Nishar Bashanim, if a little bit is left in the years. Well, the years are always the same. The Gemara asks, they're always 6 years. So what do you mean a little bit or a lot? Must mean if the value has gone up or it's gone down. That's what we're referring to. And it says. In Rabbeis Bashanim, it says Yashiv Geulasai. Then it says, then you go with the later. Then it says Yashiv Geulasai Mikesef Mikanasai. Then you go with the earlier price, meaning if the value went up, you go with the earlier price. And Ma'at Nishar Bashanim means that the price went down. There it says Kefi Shanav V'Chishav like Kefi Shanav, and then you go with the later price. So Gemara asks, why would you think that this means the price went up or the price went down? You're telling me because it's always going to be 6 years. That's not what it means. It means how deep are you into the 6 years? Is it 2 years gone by and 4 years left, or 4 years gone by and 2 years left? That's what we mean. So the Gemara says that would be the simple pshat if it would have just said Rabbeis Shonim and Ma'at Nishar Shonim. What's the base? Ma'at Bashanim. That is to teach me this halacha that you calculate based on it. If the value changed, you go with the Rabbeis or the Ma'at. As we explained it, that if the value went down, you go with the later price. If the value went up, you went with the earlier price. Either way, you go with the lower price. Now we begin the next sugya, which follows on this. It's talking about being lenient to the Eved Ivri. We'll discuss the halachas of redemption. We're going to compare it to other types of redemption. So we have the redemption of an Eved Ivri. We also have the redemption of a stei achuz. If somebody sells his ancestral fields and he inherited from his shevet generation after generation, so we know he can redeem it. And there's halachas about that redemption, just like there's halachas about the redemption of an Eved Ivri. The Gemara's question now is, can you redeem half? Let's say you can't afford the full amount. Is it possible to say to the owner, hey, look, I can afford half of it, I'm redeeming half. Now, as far as a field, that would mean that you're redeeming, let's say, half the field. There, the halacha is, no, you cannot redeem halvesies. You can only redeem if you have the full purchase amount. What about an Eved Ivri? Let's say his purchase amount was 100 zuz, and he comes up with 50 zuz. Can he say, all right, I want to redeem half, and I'll go out 3 years early? That's Gemara's question. Now, Gemara is going to show that could be both a leniency and a stringency. And the question is, do we want to go lenient and stringent? So what's the two tzadim? First of all, do we learn from stei achluza? Just like by stei achluza, you can't redeem half. Maybe here also you can't redeem half. Now, by stei achluza, we know because it says kidei geulasai. Kidei means he has to have the full amount of his geula. And Eved Ivri just says geulasai, it doesn't say kidei. So do we make exer shava geulasai, or do you say no, it doesn't say kidei here, so you don't have that halacha? On the other hand, do you want to be lenient on the Eved Ivri and allow him to redeem half fight, just like we're being lenient? So I could hear l'chumra we wouldn't be strict on him, like we said, we don't go strict on the Eved Ivri. But can you go leniently? So the Gemara says the halacha is that you don't do halvesies because it says nimkar v'loy lechatzayin. We said as far as when he sells himself, he can only sell himself for his for the full amount that he owes, not for half. It's because the word nimkar means not half. Here it says nigal, also not half. So Gemara just explains, what does it mean l'kula, what does it mean l'chumra? What is the case? When would it be a leniency? When would it be a stringency? So Gemara says a leniency would be if he was sold for, let's say, 100 zuz, and then he wants to redeem himself, and he has 50. So he redeems himself from 50. So he already paid 50, and now he only owes half the time. And then his value goes up to 200. Now if he wants to redeem himself, the complete amount that would be calculated would be 200. So if you say that he already redeemed himself for half, so he redeemed himself for half, and now he owes another half. Half of 200 is 100. So he ends up owing another 100 for a total that he had to pay of 150. If, however, you say that he can't redeem himself for half, so then how much does he have to pay now? Well, what he paid before didn't count for anything. That's still being held in escrow, and he now has to pay the total amount, which is 200. So that comes out that he has to pay 200 total, which is more, it will be a leniency to say that he is allowed to redeem by halves. Now, when is it a stringency? When is it harder on him? So that's if the opposite, if his value dropped down. If it went down from 200 to 100, and in the middle he paid half. So when he was worth 200, he paid half. So he paid 100. Then his value went down to 100. So now if you say that he already paid half, so then he has to give another 50 because his value now is 100, and 100 that he gave before was only for half of him. Now he has to redeem the other half, which is half of the value which is there, and the value is 100, so he has to give another 50, for a total of paying 150. If, however, he is not allowed to redeem himself for halves, then the money that he gave is being held in escrow, and now it's the full amount is 100, so he's going to use the 100 that he paid already as the full amount, so he doesn't have to pay anything extra. So he ends up having to pay only 100 as opposed to 150 that he would have to pay if he could redeem by halves. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? You said you can't go down in price and you can't go up in price and have to pay the greater amount. Why do we say that if it went up from 100 to 200, now he has to pay 200? It's not true. We said you always have to pay the lower amount. So says we're referring to where you started at 200, then you went down to 100, and at that point he paid half, and then you went back up to 200. That's where you would have to pay the 200 either way. Okay, the Gemara now moves a little from Eved Ivri away, and we go now to the other halachos about redeeming by halves. So we discussed that a steyachuza, a field which was sold, cannot be redeemed halfway. You have to have everything. There's also, you cannot borrow money to redeem it. You have to have the money to redeem it. The Gemara's question is, what about a batei arechem, somebody who owns a house in the wall of the city where the halachos of redemption are different? Can that be redeemed for half? So the Gemara's question is, again, the word geulasai. Can you link it to steyachuza and redeem it because it says geulasai there also, or do you not? Now, the one place where we do see a halacha that you can redeem by halves is from somebody who is makdish his steyachuza. Somebody has a field that he's makdish. There, the Torah tells me, it says in Ga'al Yigal, an extra phrase of Geula that you can redeem halves, and you could also borrow to redeem. So what do we do with batei arechem? So the Gemara says that this question was asked by Rav Huna bar Chinina to Rav Sheshes, and he wanted to answer based on a statement of Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon is what's called a Deirish time of the Kra. He was able to say halachas based on what the reasoning of the pasuk is. So he wanted to say, what is the reason that the Torah allows this kula of halves by a makish steyachuza, and why did he not allow it by a mechiras steyachuza? Masna will figure out what to do by a batei arechem. So he said the reason that he allows it is because there is a restriction on the makish steyachuza, that a makish steyachuza does not get his property back by Yovel. If he doesn't redeem it first, he doesn't get it back by Yovel. Therefore, we gave him a leniency that he should be allowed to redeem it faster. Now, a batei arechem also has a restriction, but a machar steyachuza does not have a restriction. So the reason why the machar steyachuza cannot redeem by halves because he doesn't have any restrictions. A batei arechem though is similar to a machar steyachuza. What's the restriction of a batei arechem? You have to redeem it within a year. If you don't redeem it within a year, you lose it and it doesn't come back for Yovel. So that's the reason. Therefore, it should be able to redeem in halves. Now, the Gemara has a kasha from a brisa which has a kavachemer on these inyanim, and it ends up stating clearly that a batei arechem cannot be redeemed by halves, and the Gemara is going to answer that it's different tanoim. So let's see the kavachemer. So the kavachemer, the Gemara says, is to show the need for the pasuk that says that a makdish steyachuza is allowed to redeem by halves. Why would I need that pasuk? So the brisa says because you could have learned the kavachemer from a steyachuza, and this is not using Rav Shimon's style that he understands that the leniency of geula by halves is caused by the stringency, by limitations of its returning by Yovel. It says the opposite. You learn a kavachemer, something which is stronger should be stronger, something which is weaker is even weaker. So where do you see that? So he says the steyachuza does not have a restriction of losing the ability to return by Yovel, yet you still can't redeem by halves. So a makish steyachuza, who has a restriction that it gets lost by Yovel, should certainly not be allowed to redeem by halves. Now, the